We're going deep into the early years of Microsoft, trying to really synthesize those first two crucial decades, say from 75 up to the mid-90s.
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking.
Right. We want to figure out those key moments, the strategic thinking, the decisions that took them from this tiny startup, basically, to this absolute behemoth.
And not just any behemoth. We're talking, what, a $4 trillion company now as of mid-2025? It's staggering.
It really is one of only two companies to hit that mark. And they're supposedly in this race with NVIDIA to $5 trillion. It's just wild.
Absolutely wild. And that current race, that incredible valuation, it all has roots in the groundwork laid back then. They didn't just ride the PC wave. In many ways, they created the software business model we still see today.
That's the core of it, isn't it? Understanding how they built that model. And to do that, I think we need to start even before 1975. We need to look at Bill Gates himself, specifically his upbringing in Seattle.
Oh, definitely. People know the dropout story, the coding genius, but the family environment, that's critical.
His parents were, a genuine Seattle power couple.
Absolutely. His father, Bill Gates Sr., co-founded a major law firm, K&L Gates today, very influential. But his mother, Mary Maxwell Gates, she was a force in her own right.
Yeah, not just socially prominent. She was a serious player in the business world. Sat on big corporate boards, right? Like First Interstate Bank.
First Interstate, which her family actually founded, Cairo Television.
Yeah.
And then the big one, the National Board of the United Way.
And that United Way connection is key because that's how she knew people like John Opel, the CEO of IBM.
Exactly. So picture young Bill Gates. He's growing up literally at the dinner table, listening to conversations between CEOs, governors, senators, people at the absolute top.
He's absorbing high-level strategy, negotiation tactics, how power works. It's like a real-world MBA from childhood.
It absolutely is. Long before he ever walked into a room with IBM, he'd had this masterclass in how big deals get done, how influence operates.
And you combine that unique environment with his, let's face it, incredible intellect. That's the foundation for the insight he and Paul Allen had.
The Moore's Law insight, that computing power would just keep getting cheaper and cheaper, exponentially.
Leading to what sounded completely crazy back then.
Totally wackadoo, yeah. A computer on every desk in every home.
But the genius wasn't just predicting cheap hardware.
No, that was only half of it. The real insight, the strategic leap, was realizing that if the hardware becomes a commodity, where does the value go?
It moves up the stack.
Precisely. To the software. The layer that actually makes the cheap hardware useful. Software that costs almost nothing to copy, that can be replicated infinitely.
So the vision wasn't just computers everywhere.
It was computers everywhere running Microsoft software. That was the platform play from day one. They saw that scale meant the real prize wasn't selling the box, it was owning the standard, the ecosystem. That thinking defined everything they did for the next 20 years.
Okay, so let's dig into those first 6 years, 75 to 81. They start Microsoft, and right away they define themselves as a software company, a platform company, explicitly not hardware.
Yeah, their mission was enabling the industry, providing the tools, and their very first product fits that perfectly. The BASIC interpreter.
For the Altair 8800, running on the Intel 8080 chip, the Altair was, the first real microcomputer kit for hobbyists?
Pretty much, and without BASIC, it was just this box of lights and switches. BASIC made it programmable, usable.
But they hit a snag almost instantly, something that threatened their whole software-centric model.
Oh yeah, piracy. And the irony is, it was the very community they were serving the hobbyists.
How bad was it?
Well, Emites, the Altair guys, they had an exclusive deal with Microsoft for BASIC. MITS was selling thousands of these Altair kits every month. Microsoft. They were only selling a few hundred copies of BASIC.
So thousands of computers, hundreds of software sales. Where was the rest coming from?
People were just copying it, paper tapes mostly. They saw software as information to be shared freely, not really a commercial product you paid for.
Which leads to Bill Gates writing that famous open letter to hobbyists in '76. He was pretty furious, right?
He was furious, but he was also kind of stuck. He was trying to appeal to their ethics because legally he didn't have much ground to stand on.
Right. This is the crucial context. It's 1975, 76. Software copyright wasn't really a thing yet.
Not in the way we understand it now. Copyright protected written books, music, but code. This abstract set of instructions, the legal framework just hadn't caught up. People thought about copying big mainframes, which was hard, but copying software on a tape, Easy.
So the law was lagging behind the tech.
Massively. It wasn't until 1980, believe it or not, that the U.S. Congress actually amended Title 17 to explicitly define a computer program as something you could copyright. Very fuzzy. So Gates realized, okay, yelling at hobbyists isn't a sustainable business strategy. That fixed-price exclusive deal with Elmites, it wasn't working because they couldn't control distribution.
They needed a new approach.
And the approach was brilliant. Forget controlling one channel. Make your product unavoidable. Become the standard. They abandoned exclusivity. They started licensing BASIC to everyone. All the major microcomputer makers, Apple, Commodore, Radio Shack, Tandy, the sort of trinity of the early days.
And the terms were key, right? They weren't trying to maximize profit on each deal.
Exactly. Look at Apple. Steve Wozniak was trying to write his own BASIC, couldn't quite nail the floating point stuff. They go to Microsoft. Microsoft licenses them their established, proven BASIC for, wait for it, $31,000.
$31,000. A one-time fee?
A one-time fixed fee. Peanuts, even then, for what they were getting. But Microsoft wasn't thinking about that $31K. They were thinking long-term.
Get BASIC everywhere. Make it the default.
Make it the default. Remove any reason for anyone else to write their own or use a competitor's. It created this positive spiral, as Gates called it. More computers used Microsoft BASIC, so more programmers learned it, which meant more companies had to license it. It just compounded.
They traded short-term cash for long-term platform dominance. Very smart.
Incredibly smart. And that strategic thinking, that willingness to play the long game, perfectly set them up for what happened next, the IBM deal.
Often called the greatest business deal, or blunder, in history, depending on your perspective.
Right. So 1980, IBM is the king, the sun, moon, and stars of computing, worth $34 billion, the world's most valuable company.
But they totally whiffed on the whole 8-bit microcomputer thing.
Completely missed it. They saw companies like DEC making fortunes in mini-computers, and they were reluctantly, almost grudgingly, getting into this new 16-bit personal computer market so they wouldn't miss another wave.
And they needed software. Fast, an operating system, language tools.
And logically, they didn't go to this tiny Microsoft company first. They went to the established leader in microcomputer operating systems.
Gary Kildall at Digital Research, CPM.
Exactly. CPM was the standard for 8-bit machines. But the meeting, it's legendary for how badly it went. The stories differ slightly. Maybe Kildall was out flying his plane. Maybe his wife handled the meeting poorly. Maybe there was an issue with IBM's non-disclosure agreement.
But the core sticking point seems to have been money.
That seems most likely. Kildall apparently wanted royalties, a payment for every single PC that IBM sold running his operating system.
Which sounds reasonable. That's how software was often sold, tied to the hardware.
It was the standard way, yes, aligning software value with hardware units. But IBM balked, and crucially, Gates and Microsoft were thinking differently.
So IBM, frustrated with Digital Research, basically goes back to Microsoft and says, hey, you guys seem smart. Can you find us an operating system?
Pretty much, find it or make it, just solve this problem for us. And Microsoft didn't blink.
They knew a guy, right? Tim Patterson at Seattle Computer Products.
Yep. Patterson had written this thing called QDOS, the quick and dirty operating system for the new Intel 8086 chip. It was designed to be sort of compatible with CPM APIs, which was useful.
Quick and dirty. Does it sound very promising?
No, but it worked, and it was available. Microsoft moved incredibly fast. They licensed QDOS from Seattle Computer Products for initially just $25,000.
25 grand.
25 grand to license it, adapt it, and crucially, sublicense it to IBM. They later bought the whole thing outright for another $50,000, so $75,000 total.
$75,000 for the foundation of the PC revolution.
It's unbelievable.
It's mind-boggling. So Microsoft cleans up QDOS, rebrands it as DOS, disk operating system, and goes back to IBM. And now comes the negotiation, the part that changed everything.
The Masterstroke. Microsoft sells IBM the rights to use PC-DOS along with the language interpreters for a fixed fee. About $430,000. A decent chunk of change, but still a fixed amount.
Okay, but what was the catch? What did Microsoft keep?
Everything that mattered. They kept the ownership of the underlying code, MS-DOS. And critically, they retained the non-exclusive right to license MS-DOS to anyone else on any terms they wanted.
Whoa! So IBM gets to use it, but Microsoft owns it and can sell it to all of IBM's future competitors.
Precisely. They created the ultimate toll booth for the entire emerging PC industry.
Why on earth did IBM agree to that? They were IBM. They had all the leverage, didn't they?
It seems insane in hindsight, but you have to understand IBM's mindset. First, they were a hardware company through and through. Their profits came from selling big, expensive machines with high manufacturing costs. They genuinely believed they would dominate the PC hardware market.
They thought, who's going to buy a PC from anyone but IBM?
Exactly. So, in their view, who cares if Microsoft can license DOS to others? There won't be any significant others selling IBM-compatible machines. The software term seems secondary to hardware dominance.
The massive failure to see the future, the rise of the clones.
A monumental failure. And second, IBM was paranoid about antitrust regulators. They'd been battling the government for years over mainframe monopolies.
Ah, so they actually wanted some separation.
They saw it as a benefit. By having Microsoft, this independent company, own the OS, IBM could argue they weren't creating another closed, monolithic system. They could position the PC as part of an ecosystem, giving them plausible deniability against antitrust claims.
Wow, so they traded platform control for perceived regulatory safety and out of sheer hardware arrogance.
Pretty much. They fundamentally misunderstood the economics of software, the zero marginal cost, the infinite replicability, the power of a standard. Gates saw it crystal clear. IBM was blind to it, and that one contractual clause unleashed trillions of dollars in value, mostly for Microsoft.
Okay, so the IBM PC launches in '81, and almost immediately, that flawed assumption by IBM about hardware dominance just blows up.
Because the PC wasn't that hard to copy, right? Not at all. IBM made one attempt at lock-in with a proprietary BIOS. That's the basic code that boots the machine and connects hardware to the OS. They thought that would be hard to replicate legally.
But it wasn't.
Nope. The PC was built using readily available off-the-shelf parts, and engineers quickly figured out how to reverse engineer the BIOS using clean room techniques, basically, having one team analyze IBM's BIOS and write specifications, and a separate team write new code based only on those specs without ever seeing IBM's original code.
Clever. And legal.
Perfectly legal. And companies like Compaq did this brilliantly. By 1983, Compaq went public selling IBM-compatible clones. Soon Dell, Gateway, tons of others jumped in.
And because they were all competing, hardware prices started to fall fast.
Plummet. The classic hardware race to the bottom. Good for consumers, terrible for IBM's hardware margins.
But fantastic for Microsoft.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. Because remember that DOS licensing deal? Microsoft owned MS-DOS, and they licensed it to every single one of those clone makers.
Not on a fixed fee basis this time, I assume.
Definitely not. This time it was a per-machine royalty. Every single PC clone shipped, from Compaq, from Dell, from whoever, had to have MS-DOS pre-installed, and Microsoft got a cut.
So as the PC market exploded thanks to cheap clones, Microsoft's revenue just went vertical.
Like a geyser, their revenue almost quadrupled in something like 18 months. Think about the economics. IBM and the clone makers are dealing with manufacturing, inventory, shipping, physical boxes, high variable costs. Microsoft, they're selling data, code, infinitely replicable, near zero marginal costs.
It was, like you said, the best business model ever invented up to that point.
Arguably, yes. Massive volume through OEMs, incredibly high margins, pure profit machine.
But even with DOS printing money, they knew it wasn't enough, right? DOS was powerful, but it was command line, not exactly user-friendly.
Right. And they saw what was happening with applications. VisiCalc had basically made the Apple II successful. WordStar was huge. There was clearly a massive market for software on top of the OS.
So they needed their own applications.
Yeah.
A hedge against DOS becoming less central, maybe.
Exactly. A hedge and just another huge revenue stream. So they started their consumer products division, tasked with building apps like word processors and spreadsheets.
And they made a really key hire around this time, pulling someone from Xerox PARC.
Yes, Charles Simonyi. We always hear about Apple borrowing or stealing the graphical user interface, UI ideas from PARC, but Microsoft was right there poaching talent too. Simonyi was brilliant. He understood GUIs, object-oriented programming, all the stuff developed on the Xerox Alto, that expensive, ahead of its time machine.
So Simonyi comes in and leads the development of Microsoft Word and their first spreadsheet, Multiplan.
Right, but Multiplan got crushed.
By Lotus 123Y. Was Multiplan bad?
Not technically bad, no, but Lotus made a much smarter bet on the platform. See, Microsoft, trying to be compatible and reach the existing market, designed Multiplan to run on older 8-bit machines as well as the new 16-bit IBM PC.
Okay, that sounds reasonable, covering your bases.
Reasonable, but slow. Lotus 123 did something radical. They decided to target only the brand new 16-bit IBM PC. They optimized purely for that platform.
So they were faster, Took full advantage of the new hardware.
Exactly. They were the killer app, specifically for the hot new machine everyone was buying. They focused, went all in on the future platform while Microsoft was hedging. Lotus actually had higher revenues than Microsoft around the time Microsoft went public in '86 because of 123's dominance.
That must have been a painful lesson for Microsoft's applications team.
Brutal,
Yeah.
but incredibly valuable. The takeaway was crystal clear. Always bet on the next platform. Be the killer app for where the market is going, even if our own systems division isn't fully there yet.
Which leads us perfectly into the whole OS2 versus Windows saga. This gets complicated.
It's a fascinating period of internal conflict and strategic hedging. So IBM, still reeling from the clone situation, wanted to regain control. They pushed for a new operating system, OS2.
This is supposed to replace DOS,
Yeah.
right? Offer more advanced features.
Yes, multitasking, protected memory, eventually a GUI called Presentation Manager. IBM saw it as a way to reassert control, make the PC ecosystem more proprietary again, and maybe keep PCs from getting too powerful and threatening their lucrative mainframe business.
And Microsoft was kind of forced to go along with it.
Publicly, yes, IBM was still their biggest partner. Microsoft had to commit engineers, promote OS2, declare it the future, the next big thing. It was a huge joint development effort.
But privately, they weren't so sure.
Privately, they were hedging their bets. Massively. While the A-team was working on OS2 with IBM, Microsoft had this other project bubbling away, Windows.
Which started back in '85 with Windows 1.0. And wasn't great, was it?
Windows 1.0 was pretty rough. It was basically just a graphical shell sitting on top of DOS. It couldn't overlap Windows, partly because of technical limits and partly because they were worried about infringing on Apple's GUI patents. It didn't sell well. It was seen as this B-team project, the misfits. Apparently only 65 people worked on Windows 3.1 later on.
So you have this public commitment to IBM and OS2, but this skunkworks project, Windows, is still alive.
Exactly. And then OS2 started to falter in the market. It was complex, expensive, required more powerful hardware, and IBM was actively trying to discourage the adoption of the new Intel 386 chip because those powerful machines ran Windows surprisingly well, undermining OS2.
So IBM's trying to hold back the hardware tide.
While Microsoft, behind the scenes, was doing the opposite. They were quietly encouraging the clone makers Compaq, the rebels, to push 386 machines hard. They knew the 386's 32-bit architecture and better memory management was the key to making Windows actually work properly.
That's some serious corporate maneuvering.
Yeah.
Playing both sides.
It was high-stakes poker. Maintain the IBM relationship publicly while secretly enabling the platform that would kill IBM's strategy.
And then came Windows 3.0 in 1990.
That was the turning point. Windows 3.0, running on those 386s, finally delivered a decent GUI, proper multitasking. It just worked in a way previous versions hadn't.
And the market responded.
Hugely. It sold incredibly well, doubled the sales rate of earlier versions in just 6 months. That was the moment Microsoft knew. They dropped the pretense.
The divorce from IBM.
The divorce. Windows was now officially Plan A. And around the same time, you see Steve Ballmer stepping up, building a dedicated enterprise sales force. Their mission, take on IBM directly in the corporate market.
And their weapon wasn't just Windows itself. It was the application suite.
Microsoft Office. That was the Trojan horse into the enterprise. Word, Excel, PowerPoint.
Yeah.
They'd actually started the bundle concept on the Macintosh first.
Right. I remember Office on the Mac.
But by the early 90s, knowledge workers everywhere were already using these individual Microsoft apps on their PCs. Often unofficially, it was bottom-up adoption, product-led growth, before that was even a term.
So Ballmer's sales team didn't have to sell the concept of PCs or Microsoft apps.
No, they just had to go to the CIOs and say, look, your employees are already using this stuff. Let's make it official, standardize it, give you volume licensing support. It was an easy sell. They locked in massive enterprise contracts based on usage that was already happening.
Brilliant. Leveraging existing behavior. Okay,
So
DOS dominance, the Windows win, Office taking over the enterprise. This all builds towards what you called the glorious peak.
Windows 95, August 1995. This wasn't just a software release. It was a cultural
I
phenomenon.
remember the hype. It was insane.
Yeah.
Jay Leno hosting the launch. The Rolling Stones.
They paid $14 million for the rights to use Start Me Up as the theme song. It was marketed like a blockbuster movie. Apparently, Coca-Cola executives were calling Microsoft asking for marketing tips.
For an operating system.
For an operating system, but Windows 95 delivered. It was the real deal. Finally, a proper 32-bit OS, ditching the DOS underpinnings for the most part. Much more stable, faster.
And the start menu, that little button, changed everything for regular users.
It really did. It made computers feel accessible, intuitive, less intimidating for the average person. Combined with built-in networking, multimedia support, it was the perfect product for the explosion of consumer PC adoption, PC gaming, the early internet.
It cemented Windows as the platform for the next decade, easily.
Absolutely. So in just 20 years, you go from that wackadoo idea of a computer on every desk to Microsoft effectively owning the software on almost every one of those desks. They'd replaced IBM as the center of the computing universe, all built on that foundation of software licensing, platform control, and brilliant, sometimes ruthless, strategy.
Okay, so Microsoft reaches this incredible peak with Windows 95. They own the desktop. But that kind of dominance, that scale, it inevitably attracts scrutiny and criticism.
Yeah, the story doesn't end with the triumph. The sheer power they accumulated led directly to the next phase. The controversies, the legal battles, the dark side, if you will, of that scale. It's all tied back to that core strategy of platform control.
And the most famous example is probably the antitrust case in the US. What triggered that?
The browser wars. So Windows 95 is dominant, but then this new thing called the World Wide Web starts taking off rapidly. And the main way people accessed it was through Netscape Navigator.
Right, Netscape was huge for a while.
Huge. And potentially threatening to Microsoft, because if everyone is living inside a web browser that runs on any OS, maybe the underlying OS Windows becomes less important. It could become a commodity layer itself.
So Microsoft saw Netscape as an existential threat to their platform control.
Exactly. And they responded with what became known internally and externally as Embrace, Extend, and Extinguish, EE.
How did that work with browsers?
They embraced web technology by creating their own browser, Internet Explorer. They extended it by building proprietary features into IE and integrating it tightly into Windows. And they aimed to extinguish Netscape by giving IE away for free, bundling it directly into every copy of Windows. You couldn't easily uninstall it.
And that bundling is what got the Department of Justice involved.
That was the core of the US versus Microsoft antitrust case, filed in 1998. Leveraging their OS monopoly to illegally crush competition in the browser market.
That trial was messy, wasn't it? Bill Gates' deposition famously didn't go well.
No, he came across as evasive, arrogant. The judge was not impressed. Ultimately, Microsoft was found to have engaged in monopolistic practices. There were findings that company officials even falsified some evidence. It was a huge black eye.
And it wasn't just the US, the EU also went after them.
Oh, yeah. The European Commission has a long history with Microsoft. In 2004, they won a major case, Microsoft Core v. Commission. The issue there was similar. Microsoft refused to provide competitors with necessary information to allow their server products to fully interoperate with Windows PCs and servers. Platform lock-in, basically.
Resulting in a massive fine.
Huge fine, 899 million euros eventually. And the pattern continues. Just recently, in June 2024, the EU accused them again.
What's the issue this time?
Bundling Teams, their collaboration software, with Microsoft 365 and Office 365. Same playbook, different product. Using dominance in one area, Office Productivity Suite, to push a product in another competitive area, collaboration tools like Slack.
So this EE strategy, the idea of adding proprietary hooks to things, that was a conscious strategy.
The evidence suggests yes. The Halloween documents, internal Microsoft memos leaked in 1998, really laid it bare. They identified open source software, especially Linux, as a major long-term threat, precisely because it was not proprietary.
What did the memo suggest doing about it?
They talked explicitly about strategies to decommoditize protocols and applications, basically find ways to add Microsoft-specific extensions to open standards so that competitors' products wouldn't work as well within the Microsoft ecosystem, thereby maintaining control.
Okay, so that covers the competitive practices. But the scale also led to ethical issues around government contracts, right?
Yes, significant ones. In 2019, there were major protests, even shutting down their flagship store over a $19.4 million contract with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE.
For cloud services.
For their Azure government cloud platform. The protesters and many employees objected to Microsoft facilitating ICE's operations, especially regarding deportations. But a Microsoft executive publicly stated they were proud to support ICE's work, which fueled the controversy.
And there was pushback on military contracts, too.
Also in 2019, a $480 million contract to develop augmented reality headsets based on HoloLens technology for the U.S. Army. Hundreds of employees signed a letter protesting what they called war profiteering and demanding the contract be canceled.
Yet it shows that internal tension between the business imperatives of a giant corporation and the personal ethics of its employees.
Definitely. And it extends to surveillance concerns, too. The Edward Snowden leaks in 2013 were a bombshell.
Revealing the NSA's PRISM program.
Right. And Microsoft was identified as the first company to join PRISM, giving the NSA access to data of non-U.S. citizens stored on their servers, emails, chats, files. Microsoft denied it at the time, but the documents were pretty clear.
That raises huge questions about cooperation with government surveillance. And speaking of governments, their relationship with China has also been controversial.
Highly controversial. Microsoft operates a censored version of its Bing search engine in China, complying with government demands to block searches for things like human rights or politically sensitive events.
And sometimes that censorship spills out.
Yeah, there was a major incident in 2021 where, apparently due to an error, Bing globally censored image searches for the famous Tiananmen Square Tank Man photo on the anniversary of the massacre. It highlighted how accommodating censorship in one market can have unintended worldwide consequences.
And there are even very recent security concerns linked to China and defense work.
A ProPublica report from 2025 raised serious alarms. It alleged Microsoft hadn't fully disclosed its use of engineers based in China to support some U.S. Defense Department systems. And worse, that a product those engineers worked on was subsequently hacked, reportedly by China. That brings up huge questions about supply chain security, transparency, and national security risks when dealing with sensitive government clients.
Okay, let's shift to some operational criticisms. Privacy, taxes, labor. These also seem tied to their scale.
Absolutely. Privacy has been a running battle. Windows 10 got hammered for its default settings, which collected a lot of user telemetry data. French regulators actually ordered Microsoft to start tracking users excessively.
And Windows 11 pushed mandatory Microsoft account sign-ins.
Yep, further tightening that data collection loop and user lock-in. It's a consistent push towards gathering more user data, often justified by improving services, but it raises constant privacy flags.
And there's tax avoidance. This is common for multinationals, but Microsoft seems particularly adept.
The scale is just immense. One Irish subsidiary reportedly declared $220 billion in profits in 2020 and paid zero Irish corporation tax because it was officially tax resident in Bermuda.
How does that even work?
It often involves complex schemes where intellectual property, like the core software code, is legally held by a subsidiary in a zero-tax or low-tax haven like Bermuda or Ireland. The operating companies in high-tax countries like the US or Germany then pay massive royalties to the haven-based subsidiary for the right to use the IP. This legally shifts profits out of high-tax jurisdictions.
ProPublica reported on a similar structure involving Puerto Rico.
Yes, they found Microsoft shifted over $39 billion in U.S. profits to Puerto Rico, using specific tax incentives to achieve a near-zero tax rate on those profits. It's legal, but it draws enormous criticism for depriving countries of tax revenue.
And finally, labor practices, beyond the ethical protests we mentioned.
There have been long-standing criticisms about their use of permatemps, temporary workers, often sourced through agencies, who work at Microsoft for years but don't get the same benefits, like health insurance, as direct employees. And accusations of aggressive tactics, like suing former employees who leave for competitors, ostensibly to protect trade secrets, but seen by critics as a way to stifle movement.
So it's a complex picture. The same scale and platform control that drove incredible success also created the conditions for all these criticisms: competitive, ethical, operational.
It's the unavoidable consequence of that level of power and influence.